Hi, Clive here, and welcome to this video tutorial. I imagine that as tutors, each of us want relatively hassle-free classes, where our students enjoy learning and they feel a sense of achievement. Well, in this video, I hope to share with you 10 probably common sense tips which will help you to achieve this. So stay tuned and we'll go through them together. Tip number 1. Share the class aims. Make sure that everyone who has arrived knows that they've come to the right class. Tell them what the class is. It probably won't be the first time someone's turned up for the wrong class. So when you advertise the class, make sure that it's an accurate description. Is it for all devices, or just Microsoft or Apple computers? Is it for iPads and iPhones, or Android phones and tablets? Students will probably already know how long the course will be, but just to make sure that everyone is aware, tell them how many weeks you've set the course for. Some students may have different expectations of the course, so it's a good thing to tell them the scope of the course, what the course will cover. Is it going to be an introductory course? Will it cover all aspects of the topic, or are you just going to pick and choose different elements? They need to know what to expect. What do you expect of the students? Will you expect them to do homework or research before the class? Will they be expected to bring their devices with them and do work in the class? Or will you expect them to take notes? Will there be any testing in the class of the material covered? Make sure that the students know what is expected of them. Make sure that they know to come with charged up devices that won't run out halfway through the class. Tell the students what you expect to cover in today's session. For example, you could say that by the end of today's session, you'll know all about the interface and what the various tools do. This sort of thing should be done at the beginning of every class. Another way would be to let students know what will be covered in our next class, to give them the opportunity to do some research. It's been said that a good structure to the lesson is to tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you've told them. Tip number 2. Make sure everyone is ready. Linked to the setting of goals is the need to ensure that everyone has the same version of the app or program. Make provision for those who can't have the same version because of the age of their device or for some other reason. Thought needs to be given as to how you're going to cope with this. Microsoft Word, for example, has many versions in use. Make sure that the student devices are set up and ready to go. If the devices need power, are power cords available? Are their devices charged up? Failure to do this wastes other students' time and can be a big frustration to them. If necessary, time spent before class setting up or downloading programs could solve these problems. So make sure as a tutor that you're there in plenty of time to help with this setting up. Tip number 3. Don't assume anything. As tutors, we probably know our subject like the back of our hands, so we need to assess what students know and what they don't. People come to our classes at different stages of computer literacy, so we can't make assumptions. We know the old cliche that says, to assume makes an ass of you and me. It says so in the spelling of assume. Some students may struggle with terminology, and this needs to be explained. I took one class and was explaining the use of transitions between slides in a PowerPoint presentation. A student asked the question, "What are these slides you keep talking about?" I had assumed that she knew that individual frames with information on were called slides. So you see, even the simplest of terminology may trip some students up. Maybe the content of the course may be too advanced for the student, and perhaps they may need a beginner's class. The opposite could be true, and maybe there are others who are ready for a more advanced class. Tip number 4. Students learn at different speeds. Now, we don't all learn at the same speed, so thought needs to be given as to how we're going to help the slow learners. Are we going to use helpers to take these students aside to help them? Will we try to explain the concept in a more than one way? Can we use real-life examples to help students understand? For example, we could talk about a browser being like a bus that we use to travel the internet, something that students can relate to. Conversely, how are we going to meet the needs of those who learn quickly? A fast learner can simply be bored waiting for the others to catch up and could possibly stop coming to the class. Do we use them to help the slower ones? Do we give them extra challenges to work on while they wait? For classes lucky enough to have helpers, we need to determine how we're going to use them and make sure they know what is required of them. Helpers need to be aware of the lesson content, and perhaps they could also be involved in the planning of the course. Tip number 5. Give small pieces of information at a time. Seniors can be embarrassed because they are not up to speed with their grandchildren. Grandchildren are generally more computer literate. Grandparents can feel embarrassed when they don't know the answers to some of the children's questions. Many try to make up for lost time by frantically pushing to learn everything at once, and they generally end up more frustrated. We need to emphasize that if they learn just 2 or 3 things from this class, they are doing really well. We need to give them small enough pieces of information that they can assimilate and get a good foundation on which to build. Tip number 6. Allow for disabilities. Not only do students come with varying degrees of computer literacy, many come with physical difficulties, such as impaired vision. If we are using a screen in front of the class, is the print big enough to read? We may need to use the Control+ or Command+ to enlarge what is on the computer screen. Does daylight or the room lights shine on the screen, causing a glare to make it difficult to see? If we're doing an online teaching using a PowerPoint presentation, will the thumbnail pictures of the participants hide part of our presentation? If so, we need to make the slides to the left of centre to allow for this. Some students have a hearing difficulty. Do we use a sound system so that we can be easily heard? Is there likely to be a background noise, such as road noise? How can we minimize this? We need to speak clearly and slowly in order for some students to pick up what we say. Dyslexia is another problem and can get in the way and slow students down in entering data or links. Very often as tutors we can rattle off links or tell students to fill in panels without allowing people enough time to complete the action. As a result, they get behind and get frustrated. In their hurry, some students, particularly with dyslexia, make spelling errors or have difficulty with P's or B's or D's, which slows them down. Then there are other physical disabilities, which will make it more difficult for them to keep up with the class. A student may suffer from memory loss and can't remember what was taught to them last week. This is not only frustrating for the student, but also the tutor, so patience in these situations is needed. The environment, although not a physical disability, can also have an effect on learning. Is the room too hot or too cold? It pays to be aware of how comfortable our students are if we want them to learn and pay attention to the lesson. Tip number 7. Handouts are a great help. These handouts will contain material that is being covered in class. Some students learn better through reading, and to be able to go over the notes taken is a great help. They may pick up aspects of the topic that they missed in class. The tutor is not the sole fount of all knowledge on the subject. In much of computer learning and usage, there is often more than one way of achieving the same end. The handouts may also contain links to other sites which deal with the topic, but maybe in a different way. A series of practice exercises would also be helpful inclusion. It can be in the form of a quiz or a challenge, just to make it interesting. Should handouts be given before or after the lesson? There is always a debate on this. One preference is after, to avoid the students getting ahead of the tutor and not listening to what is being said. Handouts are an important part of the class, and seniors also seem to relax quite a bit when they know that handouts will be available. They really appreciate having something in written form that they can refer to later. Tip number 8. Allow time for hands-on experience. As with everything, we get better, we need to practice. Hands-on experience in the class is a good start. Don't just tell the students what to do, get them to do it then and there, over and over again, until they become proficient. Again, setting homework for after the class is also helpful. As tutors, we need to emphasize the necessity to practice, to make the action become natural for us, and to be able to understand the topic. They say that practice makes perfect, but we have to watch out that practicing an error doesn't reinforce it. We need to make sure that the students completely understand what they are doing. Tip number 9. Build confidence through positive reinforcement. Nothing gives confidence like positive reinforcement. When a student achieves something, they should be encouraged. Many students come to the class still scared of their computers, and we can encourage them to do small things and then praise them for it. It builds their confidence. When they ask a good question, say something like, "Well, that's an excellent question. Thanks very much for asking it." It makes them feel good and that they've made a worthwhile contribution to the class. And finally, tip number 10, questions. Questions should be encouraged. The student should feel free to ask any question without the fear of being made to look stupid. It has been said that the only stupid question is the one that isn't asked, and maybe someone else in the class wants the same question answered. Be honest if you don't know the answer and offer to find out. Or better still, get the student to find out from the other sources and report back to the class. Attitude. The attitude of the tutor can make or break a class. If the tutor has a superior attitude, then students will feel inhibited. If, on the other hand, the tutor treats the students as equals and just wants to help them learn a particular skill, then it makes all the difference. So a positive, healthy attitude makes for a happy, effective learning situation. In summary then, as tutors we need to share the class aims. We need to make sure that everyone is ready to learn. We don't assume things and realise that students learn at different speeds. Let's give our students small enough bites of information for them to assimilate. We recognise any disabilities that exist in the class and make allowances for them. Remember, handouts are helpful tools and go hand in hand with the practicing that we encourage. Let us praise our students, encourage their questions, and above all, have a happy, healthy attitude towards them. So there you are, just 10 quick tips to help you with your classes. And I'm sure that you can think of plenty more ideas to streamline your teaching. So, until next time, take care and happy tutoring.